Okay. As respect people. Manners respect people. I go on with AI, A-Fry. We're upon the educational program again. We're back on this educational thing, so make sure so you have on a pencil, make sure so you have on a book, empty one page, or find empty page to write down things. So now for the things I'm not saying I know uh, I don't think I know enough for have one bag of name, a bag of letter after my name. But at least I'm smart enough to listen to smart people. At least that's a start. So the people I'm gonna listen to and I highlight, it's people that has accomplished way more than I'll command on my two buckler sauce. These people are well established in life and in society. Them are like the foundation of everything, right? You know, the thing about it, it's such a mighty race like our race. It's so it's so mangled, jangled. No uniformity. In a slavery there was uniformity because I'm telling you when to go to bed, when to work, when to I think that at the younger time we did have uniformity, in a free culture. Maybe back in the days in Africa when kings and queens were organized and but today's society, we were sitting mangled and jangled and tossed here and tossed there. It just it's just sad. That's what it becomes. Listen to all of these people. Yeah, it's sad how it's become because we did have such a strong unity culture sense of pride, greatness. So that's what I'm doing. I'm highlighting these people greatness, past, present, and future. And just listen, loving when the doctor said that. That should be our purpose, our goal. And that's what we're supposed to try to achieve. I'm gonna tell you some people, their whole life it just spent on worrying about other people's life. Their whole life is spent on watching other people's life. It's not watching it in a sense to emulate or to. There's enough time people check on you. Them not check on you to see if you're doing good. Them check on you to see if you're alive or if you're dead. More if you're dead than if you're alive, right? Cause them check on you and it's not like them check on you and I say, all right, then keep up the good work or anything. And check on you and then later on and go about them business. And time you're dead now, at that time, them a come and say, oh, you're this and you're that and all of them things there. You know, that's how people are. That's the mind some inhumane people have. You go about your life and feel your life more important to them than it is to you. But obviously important to you. First I'm finding out I am okay, right? When it's all said and done, as long as I'm happy, right? Cause you know say right through life you're gonna have critic, condemn us. People there's so much. But me tell you say I want to take my time and continue doing what I do instead of try to overwhelm. So 2 days now, we do ladies a highlight ladies. I say when people talk about other people, it's good. But when people talk about themselves, it's better. Hear about your Selassie I, right? How some people view your Selassie I. There's different views. So we say everything we do is just a exploration, right? We highlight them things there. This is why we have part two, part three, part four of things, right? If we can label them better, that would be good. But what we are doing right now, I'm happy with what we are doing now. I try to hook up my thing there today. I try to hook up my merchandise shop today. Uh, that one time I tell you, I have to focus a little bit more time on them little things here. So I say some things, I just have to cut out some things, implement some things, fix this, fix that. Me have to work on it. And me have to work on it also. Because the people that say them might help, trust me. Them not help. But anyways, people. Haile Selassie. He's a Ethiopian emperor. There's so much different story about Haile Selassie. So today is gonna be the start. Like this is like pretty much part one of Haile Selassie. People me tell you same time we reach over here, so it's like get yourself comfortable, get your pencil, get your paper, get your brain in talk, in act. And you sit down and you listen. Can punch in the comment section and no feel or whatever. But me try to put the information them like about whatever situation. And that me gonna start in the chat. Right? I put so when people are watching, at least them know what go on. And I know hurrying up people because you see everybody have them own lane, them own space, them own time. So and the people that must stop by all the time. Like and share us. We don't have my crew called Be Unlimited crew already, you know. Right? That because we don't have the scoop on nuts from before. We tell the people there's actually you don't know so much stories they them on. But you see? The good story them. People don't want to hear them good story. They don't want to hear the just sensational. But we are rolling with the good story them people. We're rolling with the good story them. So time by time I gotta tell a story here and a story there. But this month belong to the greats. Heroes and sheroes. All the amazing people them. Who left such an impact on this universe, this world. And them space cannot be taken by nobody. It cannot be replicated or duplicated. Because the copy is just a copy. Can't be the real thing. Alright, so people, make a continue now, yeah, sir. Alright, so this is Real Royalty. This is a channel. Haile Selassie, controversial Ethiopian empire turned Rastafarian Messiah. So, because I get all kind of information everywhere. Knowledge come from the 144,000 corners of the world, circles of the world, because there's no corners. How are this? How are that? Oh, oops. You don't understand. Yeah, so knowledge comes from 144,000 circles of the world. So, as we proceed with some information on Haile Selassie, people. I'll see as we proceed.
The man known to history as Emperor Haile Selassie I was born on the 23rd of July 1892 in the town of Ejarzagoro, not far from the city of Harar in Ethiopia. He was given the name Lij Tafari Makonnen in his youth. Lij simply means child of, while Tafari means one who is respected or feared. Makonnen was his father's name, and so, as he was growing up, he was known as the child of Makonnen, who is greatly respected. His father, Ras Makonnen, was the governor of the ancient walled city of Harar in eastern Ethiopia, and a key advisor to his near kinsman, Emperor Menelik II, who was emperor at the time. Thus, Lij Tafari Makonnen was born into a significant noble family which was related to the current imperial dynasty. Through his paternal grandmother, Tafari was descended from the Solomonic line of kings, who had ruled this part of Africa since the 13th century. Tafari's mother was Woizero Yeshimebet Ali, the daughter of a ruling chief from Wollo province to the north.
We decided to build a border wall between.
Okay, people, I don't know how comes in time I do my program, then people always stack it up with so much commercial right off of the bat. I'm trying to watch a commercial them and then go through and you don't know so that not gonna work. Because the more you watch a commercial come on. Right? As we continue, people.
Daughter of a ruling chief from Wollo province to the north. Any exploration of Tafari's life must start by exploring the nature of Ethiopian society and the empire that ruled it in the late 19th century. Ethiopia and the wider Horn of Africa have a unique history. 1700 years ago, when the Roman Empire ruled all of North Africa, Roman Egypt emerged as a major early center of Christianity in the Eastern Mediterranean. Soon, the new religion spread south beyond the borders of the Roman Empire, down the River Nile and the coast of the Red Sea. It gained many adherents in what is now Ethiopia, which effectively became a Christian country. However, with the Arab conquests of the Middle East and North Africa in the 7th century AD, Ethiopia was effectively cut off from the rest of the Christian world. But it did not convert to Islam. Accordingly, over the centuries, a unique form of Christianity developed here, one which continued to adhere to many of the rites which were typical of the 4th century church. Moreover, Ethiopian politics and culture became shrouded in biblical legend, and from the 13th century onwards, the rulers of the Kingdom of Ethiopia claimed to be descended from the biblical King Solomon. Therefore, their dynastic line has become known as the Solomonic dynasty. This Solomonic dynasty ruled a kingdom which centuries ago only constituted part of northern Ethiopia, but between the 13th and 19th centuries, it began expanding to the south, west, and east, eventually covering an area approximate to modern-day Ethiopia. As it did so, the Ethiopian Empire became a multicultural state, one which had many different ethnic peoples living under the rule of the emperors. The foremost of these were the Oromo and Amhara people, who between them made up over half the population of the empire. But significant minorities included the Somalis in the far south and east of the country, and the Tigrayans in the northeast.
So right there, so you have 5 different culture. I rule under one empire. And that much I show you people. There's before all of this mental issue we have. People used to live good amongst each other. Live good amongst other people too. But we don't know the war thing again, right? The barrier thing where people create. As we proceed, people.
South and east of the country, and the Tigrayans in the northeast. These different ethnicities spoke different languages and had somewhat different appearances. For instance, the Oromo are a Cushitic people who dominated the northwestern part of the country and had been more responsive to the spread of Islam into the region. The Amhara are a Semitic people who dominated the highlands of Ethiopia and were much more committed to Oriental Orthodox Christianity. These ethnic and religious divisions would influence Selassie's rule and indeed the entire history of modern Ethiopia. Indeed, so central are they to the country's history that the alternative name which was used for the Ethiopian Empire at the time of Tafari's birth was Abyssinia, from the Arabic Habasa term for mixture, a reference to the multicultural nature of the empire. By the mid-19th century,
you see, people, there was a multicultural, different. This is what we get from everything, you know. Everybody could claim to be whatever they want, practice whatever they want, right? Under one umbrella, one ruler. As we proceed, people,
European Empire had become one of the most powerful states in Africa, and it needed to be. For the great European powers were entering into a period of accelerated colonization of the continent. To the north, Egypt had effectively become a British protectorate, and British rule was being extended down the River Nile into Sudan, Ethiopia's western neighbor, and eventually into Uganda and Kenya, the southern neighbors of Abyssinia. To the east of Abyssinia, along the coastline of the Horn of Africa, a number of European powers acquired territory through treaties and military intervention in the years leading up to Tafari's birth. The foremost of these was the Kingdom of Italy, which acquired the colonies of Italian Somaliland and Eritrea in the 1880s, comprising most of the modern-day countries of Eritrea and Somalia. The British and French also carved out small enclaves in northern Somaliland. In the end, nearly all of Africa was annexed by the European powers in what has become known as the Scramble for Africa. However, Abyssinia avoided this fate, in large part because Emperor Menelik II, who came to power in 1889, began a
Emperor Benedict II. And again, I hear them talk about him before. So it's Haile Selassie. And now this Benedict
II, who came to power in 1889, began a program of modernization. He established Addis Ababa as a strong new capital in the center of the empire and developed an alliance with the Russian Empire from 1893 onwards. Through this, the Russians sent military advisors, scientists, and economists to Abyssinia to advise the country on how to modernize its government, economy, and military, with a view to withstanding encroachments by the Italians, British, French, and others. Thus, when Tafari was born in 1892, a new era of Ethiopian history was beginning. As a son of a major Ethiopian noble, Tafari was afforded honors from a young age. For instance, when he was just 13 years old, he was given the title of D-IEASYJERK of Gara Mulata, an administrative region near the city of Harar. D-IEASYJERK literally means keeper of the door, and shows that he was a protector of sorts of the region, while still barely a teenager. Yet there was little sign at this time that he would ascend to a position of imperial authority. For, despite the fact that he was related to the imperial family, Emperor Menelik II had a clear line of succession in place. He had two daughters, Sharega and Zewditu. Through these, Menelik had several grandsons, one of whom, Lij Iyasu, the son of Sharega, was eventually designated by Menelik as his successor. Meanwhile, Tafari's youth also saw a concerted effort by the Kingdom of Italy to connect its two colonies of Eritrea and Somaliland by conquering Abyssinia. In 1895, the Italians invaded Abyssinia, but Emperor Menelik's modernization efforts proved beneficial, and the short-lived First Italo-Ethiopian War ended a year later in 1896, when an Italian invasion force of some 15,000 men were decisively defeated by a much larger Ethiopian army of upwards of 75,000 at the Battle of Adwa. With this, Abyssinia's independence was secured for a generation.
Battle of Agua. I heard about that. I tell you, say, all of them things that people make, I heard about these things. So, eventually, I'm going to do, like, eventually, I'm going to document and put all of them things that together, people. I'm telling you, the Battle of Agua. It's nice to be in school and sit in class. It's nice to be in school so you can sit in class.
Was secured for a generation.
Did you know such
people are telling me and them commercial, because I'm telling you, I'm not like some of the people I'm seeing thing already, And again, these are the program I'll be listening to. So even when I'm not on YouTube regularly, these are the stuff from Mr. I go switch up to. 1 and 2 YouTube channel me go and listen to, but otherwise, and again, if you know, even if you subscribe eventually and you know watch the channel them, eventually then the algorithm will take them out and then you're gonna get all these good programs. But as we proceed, people, I'm gonna try do like a thing there without the like tape recorded without the commercials them and see how that works. Eventually, people, when we get a little bit better upon this.
A generation. In his teenage years, Tafari was
South Africa is seen.
Holy man, how are you going to so? That was me, people. That wasn't deliberate, anyways.
Tafari was promoted further within the empire. In 1907, for instance, he was appointed as a governor of the province of Sidamo in the south of Ethiopia. He sired a daughter during this time, the future Princess Romanwalk, though the identity of her mother is not entirely certain. In 1911, he married Menen Asfau, also a member of the...
You see how simple them slightly said that? You know one of them times there, right? You guys know one of them times that were going. Certain things going in them times that wouldn't go on nowadays. Right? So even though the culture did different and people did live a certain way, right? Just know say back in them days that enough wrong going. Just like in a today's society, enough wrong going. But make you think back then it was any different. Just as say, I'm just saying people, because I'm telling you sometimes them people they don't really say certain things, right? Then just have to say it for just make you use your imagination, right? Or fill in the pieces or assume or whatever it is, right? And I'm always leave out a part because I'm always say half the story has never been told. As we proceed, people.
In 1911, he married Menen Asfau, also a member of the imperial family. This was around the time when Emperor Menelik II, who was nearing his 70th year, became increasingly more incapacitated due to a series of strokes he had suffered. He eventually died in 1913, leaving his 18-year-old grandson D-IEASYJERK as the emperor designate. Yasu had been serving as de facto emperor for some time by 1913, on account of his grandfather's illness. Under such circumstances, this might have allowed him to solidify his position in advance of the emperor's death. But instead, the direct opposite had occurred. Yasu had found himself increasingly opposed by the Council of Ministers which his grandfather had established, and even by his own aunt, Menelik's younger daughter, Princess Zewditu. Thus, when Menelik finally died in December 1913, the Council of Ministers and the princess suppressed news of his passing and did not confirm Yasu as the new emperor. He was left to enjoy some semblance of power in the months that followed, but his accession would never be proclaimed, and he would never be given an imperial name. There were multiple reasons for this opposition to Yasu. Firstly, in the final years of Menelik's reign, the young prince had shown himself disinclined to the kind of administration and management which was necessary for the ruler of a rapidly modern...
The man never interested in a study thing. The man just said want to have fun. So when them elderly say, yo, that brother, yeah, it's like say him not have the kahunas if take the position where the elder did in before, right? So obviously when the council get together and look on certain things and she said it not gonna work. But with some people now, them have the money if you buy out the situation, right? As we proceed, people.
Rapidly modernizing empire. Secondly, and more importantly, there were concerns that he was disposed to Islam over the Christian faith, which was central to Ethiopian political life. The latter issue was unacceptable to the Council of Ministers, and when rumors that Iyasu had converted to Islam mounted in the mid-1910s, they moved to depose him as emperor in the autumn of 1916. He was placed under arrest and would spend the rest of his life, down to the mid-1930s, in detention. Following his removal from power, Zewditu was proclaimed as Empress of Ethiopia. But with the succession now unsure, it was decided that her cousin, Lij Tavare Makonnen, the future Emperor Haile Selassie, would be appointed as her regent and designated successor. Evidently, Tafare's tenure as a regional governor of several provinces in the late 1900s and into the 1910s had been successful, and he had weathered the political intrigue of the years of Iyasu's brief reign very well. Thus, the stage was set for Tafare to one day succeed Zewditu, who was entering her 40s when she became empress and did not have any other clear successor.
So I guess you never have no kids. That's pretty much what it works out to be, because if you did have kids, those kids would be in line to be. But again, they kept it in the family.
Have any other clear successor. In the years that followed, a clear delineation developed within the government of Abyssinia between Empress Zewditu and the regent Tafare. She was a traditionalist and a conservative ruler, while he was following the path hewn by Emperor Menelik II in wishing to modernize Ethiopia. In theory, the empress was by far the more powerful figure, but her position was weaker than any of her predecessors as ruler of Abyssinia, for the simple reason that she was a woman in a society.
Because she was a woman in a society run by men. And things not change. Things not change. Wow. I wonder if we ever pay attention to why things not change. I would just say, why things never change. And I understand that the key factor why things never change are because of we. As we proceed, people.
Ruler of Abyssinia, for the simple reason that she was a woman in a society which prioritized male rule. As such, Tafare was able to claim a great deal more influence than would have been typical of the power dynamic between them in most other circumstances. Both had their factions. She was favored by the Ethiopian Church, which looked kindly on her conservative values, while Tafare was supported by a clear majority of the Council of Ministers. Eventually, in the course of the 1920s, he emerged as the more powerful figure, and long before her rule would end, Zewditu had begun to withdraw from government and allowed Tafare to continue his modernization efforts in the 1920s. The modernization program, which was implemented in the 1920s, was multifaceted. Much of it centered on trying to modernize the government and administration of Abyssinia to make it more like those of the European powers. There was a precedent for this. The non-European power which had modernized most effectively in the 19th century was the Empire of Japan. It had done so by adopting Western methods and had thus resisted Western encroachments and established itself as a major power itself in the Far East by the 1920s. Abyssinia aimed to
1920s. Them established themselves from the 1920s. Discipline, you know. And China still their own are going good.
To partially emulate this approach. Thus, a Western-style government was established by Tafare. one with ministers responsible for individual aspects of governance. In tandem, there was a move away from the feudal nature of Ethiopian government to a political system where individuals were promoted based on their abilities rather than their noble rank. Finally, Abyssinia applied for membership in the newly established League of Nations, a forerunner of the United Nations. It became a member in 1923.
A forerunner, that means that before them come up with the United Nations.
The few non-Western nations to ever become a member of the League. Even more significant were the attempted economic and social reforms which were introduced during the reign of Empress Zewditu and the regency of Tafari. Already the first electricity grids had been introduced to Addis Ababa in the mid-1910s, and this was expanded outwards in the 1920s.
Wow, 1910. Addis Ababa have electricity. And some part of Jamaica still not have electricity. People, can you imagine? 1910. And places at Jamaica in 2025 don't have electricity. People have to use candle and abandon them house. In people, as we proceed, people, may I tell you so, yo, everything get advanced except us. As we proceed,
was expanded outwards in the 1920s. At the same time, efforts were initiated to begin linking the main cities with roads and eventually railway lines. The telegraph and other communication systems, which had become commonplace in the Western world in the second half of the 19th century, also finally arrived to Abyssinia, albeit in a limited fashion.
You know, Albert, in a limited fashion. Would I love even that limited fashion there are some part of Jamaica. And that may I show you how them people can be so advanced way back then. These people had the capabilities to create, right? Genius ideas with limited material. And then people have unlimited material and can't come up with nothing will represent anything. How the hell is that possible? All them people can't do nothing nowadays. It's mind-boggling, people. It really is, you know. As we proceed,
the National Bank of Ethiopia was founded in 1927 to bolster the economy, and excessive lending rates were prohibited. Perhaps most importantly, the judicial system was overhauled with the Feta Negas law code, a legal system which had been used in Ethiopia for centuries and which imposed brutal punishments for moderate crimes, such as the loss of a hand for being found guilty of theft, was gradually phased out in favor of a Western judicial system based on...
So you know a thief. At least you can't call him a thief because they have one hand, right? Suppose that when still a go on. You think they don't want to have so much teeth, or you think they don't want to have more one-hand people? Because would chopping off them and deter them from thieving. Because them stop chop off and then give them sentence, then go to jail, then come back out, then thief, then go back to jail, then come back out, then go. So at least if you chop off the hand and then come out and do it again and chop off the next one, that's the end of it. As we proceed, people.
A Western judicial system based on elements of the civil and common law. But there was a major backward element to Abyssinian society which remained. Slavery was still widespread here, a century...
We can't chop off their hand, but we can put them in a chains and bondage and sell them. At that match I show you, justice is never down the middle. Justice is always set up for the people that may create justice. You said the law, everything is legal until enough people say it's not. That's how it works. Anything or everything is legal until enough people say it's not illegal. And then once they say it's not illegal, then they make up laws for punishments for whatever illegal stuff was legal before. Until they say it coming like I swear. When I look on it sometimes it coming like a Rubik's Cube. A real Rubik's Cube. And sometimes trust me. So no wonder we always have mental issue. Because the things that we go through on a daily basis, and I like so we accept it. It's just that we can't do nothing about it. And that's what we can't do nothing about. We can't stop a person from hating you because them can't hate. I'm telling you so that hate word should be a blasphemy word. As we proceed, people.
After it had been prohibited throughout much of the Western world, tokenistic efforts were made to end this in the 1920s as the Western powers criticized the retention of the system in Ethiopia. But Tafari was unwilling to commit to any major efforts to eliminate it from Abyssinian society at the...
Okay, and that I'm name there. That Haile Selassie I am believing us in a slavery, right? Me not understand how a person who believe in a slavery is so great. I don't know people. Me not know. Me just hear how people talk about him, say him are the reincarnation of the Almighty. So me just say, how can a person think of equal rights and justice for all and still believe in a slavery? And that me not understand. When I save the people them, the thief them, when I save the thief, me say them, sure, them save the thief them from continue thieving. Them save them for continue thieving instead of chop off them hand. But we're not gonna do injustice to our entire race of people. Ethiopia did black. I mean, Haile Selassie I did black. All of them things I'm not really sure about still. No. As we proceed, though, we're gonna learn them things, people.
To any major efforts to eliminate it from Abyssinian society at this time. Meanwhile, Tafari's international reputation was growing, and by the end of the 1920s, he was increasingly viewed as the face of Abyssinia on the world stage, rather than the empress. Much of this was owing to numerous trips abroad and state visits. For instance, in 1924, he undertook a tour of numerous foreign capitals and major cities with other members of the extended imperial family and the government. This was a fact-finding mission as much as anything else, as Tafari and others sought to gain from direct experience of the Western societies they were attempting to emulate. The Abyssinian delegation, with its ostentatious displays of wealth and court ritual, made a significant impression in London and Paris, where Tafari met King George V and the French Prime Minister Raymond Poincaré. Another significant goal of this foreign tour was to try to convince the British and French governments to provide Abyssinia with access to the Red Sea by surrendering some territory in its colonial enclaves in Somaliland. Elsewhere, in the Middle East and North Africa, Tafari was greeted warmly as the all-but head of state of virtually the only African nation which had withstood European colonization in the 19th century. All of this ensured that, before he would ever become emperor, Tafari was well established on the international stage.
Meet Ronald Erickson aboard.
Okay, buddy, okay. All right, so we win one war, right? And then all of the other African countries them say yes. This the man, this the man. So pretty much after I win the war, I go around visit all of the other countries them, you see? He might go for benefit himself, you know. When one part of the Red Sea. Where's the Red Sea? In Africa. Is it? People, I'm telling you, most of them information I hear that only the basic of everything, right? You know, really get to know, find out the detail of situation. All right. So just in case you never know about Haile Selassie, now you get to know about Haile Selassie, because we hear so much things about him, but who is he? As we proceed.
Published on the international stage. By 1928, Tafari's position at home in Abyssinia was such that the Empress could not but promote him ever further. By this time, he had monopolized power within the Council of Ministers.
Okay, she had a queen, right? And she said he's more charismatic, he's more energetic, he's more people friendly, he's all of them stuff. Now the same situation with Marcus Garvey and his wife when Marcus Garvey got jailed. He was in the same position to give her the power so she could have continued too. But again, the story is never about woman, you know. The story is always about man. Because in this situation, right, they never really respect her too tough. And him did a lead charge. So it was easy for us to say, okay, then fine. You done run things already. What make Marcus Garvey could have done the same thing? Yes? No? I'm just saying. Now analyze them things, I know. All right, as we proceed.
And, more importantly, had also moved to secure the loyalty of the heads of the military and police forces. Thus, on the 7th of October 1928, he was crowned as Negus, an Abyssinian title equivalent to a king, though still below that of emperor or empress. This replaced his earlier honorific of Ras, which had signified his position within the imperial line. In the months that followed, tensions began to brew between the empress's faction and that of Tafari, ultimately culminating in January 1930 in the outbreak of a borderline civil war between Tafari and Gugsewella, the empress's husband. He not only wished to reassert his wife's authority within the empire, but now...
Whoa! So I'm going to tell you, the same thing, people. Okay, so he was not as the emperor, right? And the same thing, he was not as high as the lady. She give him power. Him and her husband a fight over power. Because him probably run things a certain way and the husband feel a certain way about how him run things. Right? All I'm sure is just the Haile Selassie. You never really hear nothing, right? As we proceed, people, because again, you don't have to agree with everything a person say. You just have to be able to understand and then find your own solution. As we proceed.
He not only wished to reassert his wife's authority within the empire, but now had designs of replacing Tafari as the head of the government and having himself crowned as...
Obviously, him have him own intentions, right? Him have him own goals and aspirations. As we proceed, me just say, it's never smooth. Nothing is never, you know? You can never compromise and work out things. It's always has to come down to my rule are no rules. As we proceed, people.
Gugsewella's rebellion culminated in a major meeting of his forces and the supporters of Tafari at the Battle of Anchem on the 31st of March 1930. But with their superior Western armaments and methods, which included the use of modern aircraft, Tafari's supporters quickly defeated Gugsewella's army. He himself was killed in the fighting. Then, in a seemingly unconnected development, the Empress died of natural causes just
I'm telling you, say it's not gonna be written. It's not gonna be written. It's not gonna be notified or anything else. But all of a sudden, she just gets sick and dead. So right? Okay, if that's how you guys see it, right? If her husband dead and she just feels sick and she just dead. So of natural causes, by the way. So now him become the leader, right? As we continue, people.
Causes just 2 days later, clearing the way for Tafari to claim absolute power in Abyssinia after
2 days later, no? 2 days later, she dead.
of dual rule between him and the Empress. A mourning period of over half a year was imposed following the passing of Empress Zewditu, but at last, on the 2nd of November 1930, Tafari was proclaimed as the new Emperor of Abyssinia and crowned that same day at the Cathedral of St. George in Addis Ababa. Emissaries from many Western nations attended the event, and Tafari featured on the cover of Time magazine that November. He also adopted a new name and title. The title he obtained was now Negusa Nagast, the King of Kings, while his imperial name would be Haile Selassie.
Okay. So him change him name and him give him the title Kings of Kings. It wasn't like other people say, okay, let's make him king, make him be the Kings of Kings. Because them said they crown him Kings of Kings. And that me always hear people say, no, them crown him Kings of Kings, Lords of Lords, conquering Lion of all. And I say, okay. But now them I say, right? He changed his name and gave him the name Kings of Kings. Okay, people, as we proceed.
The King of Kings, while his imperial name would be Haile Selassie. Haile title. The title he obtained was now Negusa Nagast, the King of Kings, while his imperial name would be Haile Selassie. Haile means power of, and Selassie means Trinity. So the name Haile Selassie effectively means the power of the Trinity. However, as we will see later, the former name he bore for much of the 1920s, Rastafari, was to gain currency again in later years and become increasingly well-known globally. More immediately, in the early 1930s, just after his accession as Emperor Haile Selassie I, the new ruler of Ethiopia quickly oversaw the introduction of Ethiopia's first modern constitution in 1931. This provided for the establishment of a bicameral legislature, with a parliament and an upper house of lords, with whom the emperor would share power. It was also intended that a new constitution would further lead to the end of the Feta Nagest legal system and its replacement with a Western judicial code.
Okay. So when him go in, him just go in and create him own parliament, him own more westernized way of dealing with the legal system. As we proceed, people.
Nagest legal system and its replacement with a Western judicial code. The first years of Selassie's reign as emperor were marked by his efforts to continue and expand the modernization program he had first initiated as regent in the 1920s. However, a shadow was increasingly hanging over Ethiopia. Back in 1922, the Italian government had been taken over by the National Fascist Party led by Benito Mussolini after the infamous march on Rome by 30,000 paramilitary fascist blackshirts. One of Mussolini's great desires was to build Italy into a great power again and to resurrect the empire Italians had.
You see, all of them people always come up with them idea. Let's this place be great again. Let that place be great again. Let us be the most dominant race again. All of them things, I know, and then at the end of the day, the whole of them suffer. Yo, people, are we better off the way we are for real? Because anytime them people get power, them out, this is how them always. Because I know about Mussolini, right? I hear about all of them people, but I'm telling you, eventually I'm going to do deep dive into all of these information. Right? Just to find out how the past is the future. Because most of them things are going from how long them things are going. How people live. As we proceed, people.
Mussolini's great desires was to build Italy into a great power again and to resurrect the empire Italians had enjoyed back in the days of Rome 2 millennia earlier. To that end, in the 1920s, he had engaged in a series of aggressive actions, initiating a brutal war of conquest in Libya, which had been a nominal colony of Italy's since 1912, as well as bombing the island of Corfu during a dispute with the Kingdom of Greece, annexing the city of Fiume in what is now Croatia and establishing a protectorate over Albania through a series of treaties in the mid-1920s.
Wow. I tell you some them people, you know. That's all the people them look for doing, you know. War, conquer, conquer. War, conquer, conquer, conquer. So even long before my born, them same thing are going. Long after I'm dead, them same thing are go continuously going. Until we understand, so we have to change it. It's just crazy. Just looking at these things and seeing, oh, it's pretty much still the same. It's pretty much still the same. I'm gonna say we hate each other even more than anything else. You know, all what go on. Wow. As we proceed.
With these advances made, in the early 1930s, Mussolini's attentions turned to the Horn of Africa, where he increasingly wished to correct what he deemed to be an historical failing of Italy's, its loss to Ethiopia in the First Italo-Ethiopian.
Oh my goodness, you see? Vengeance. So him want come now and him say, oh, I want to take revenge for the loss that we take. As we proceed.
Back in the 1890s, if Abyssinia could be conquered, it would also make a continuous colony of Italy's lands in Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Italian Somaliland, in turn making it the predominant colonial power in the Horn of Africa. In 1934, tensions between Selassie's government and the Italian colonial administration in Eritrea and Somaliland began to flare over a long-running boundary dispute which had been caused by Italy's wish to build a railway line through the region connecting its two divided colonies, which Ethiopia was in the middle of. This had culminated in Italy building a military fort at Walwal in eastern Ethiopia. In 1934, the Italian presence here was challenged by Selassie's government when Abyssinian troops were sent to Walwal. On the 5th of December, this led to violent engagements between the Italians and the Ethiopians, resulting in dozens of deaths on both sides. An international diplomatic standoff followed, now known as the Abyssinia Crisis. In early January 1935, Selassie's government protested to the League of Nations. Months of diplomatic toing and froing would follow, but essentially the British and French...
The same paperwork them, the same paperwork them, the same paperwork them, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's what I'm telling you. I know me live this a life here before, you know. And this a life you feel exactly like the last life. And honestly, I hope the next life is not like this a life here, you know, for real. It's crazy. Wow. As we proceed, people, them things are some deep sin thing, you know.
Would follow, But essentially the British and French governments, who were best placed to act as intermediaries, were unwilling to block Italian aggression at a time when they were trying to win over Mussolini as an ally in Europe in the face of the rise of the Nazis following Adolf Hitler's seizure of power in Germany in 1933. Consequently, while negotiations followed for months, it eventually became clear to Selassie's government that the Italians were intent on using the Walwal incident in December 1934 and the ensuing diplomatic standoff as an excuse to declare war on
And that we tell you, we never forget. We will, we don't remember the good things, We never remember the good things, only the bad things. And we carry it on, see we in this society. The squabble between the countries, them, the superpower, them, Ukraine and Russia right now, in our modern times, only people. What a sad status a life, man. Because people are get boxed up from wheel, and them people, the people that must start them things are them never the one that forget box up. Thousands on each side. And the people them in the office with the paperwork, them play chess. This is not funny, people. But tell us, say, as we proceed, people.
Abyssinia, and that the League of Nations was not going to take any effective measures to try to stop Mussolini's aggression. The Second Italo-Abyssinian War commenced on the 3rd of October 1935, when the Italian general Emilio de Bono crossed over the border from Italy's colony of Eritrea into northern Ethiopia with tens of thousands of Italian troops. There was no formal declaration of war. This was to be one of the most significant conflicts globally during the interwar period between the First World War and the Second World War, eventually involving hundreds of thousands of troops and personnel on both sides. It would last for just over a half a year. The sides were evenly matched throughout, though. While the Ethiopians were numerically superior, despite the best efforts to modernize their army since the 1890s, their forces were still resoundingly based on mass infantry divisions. For instance, Selassie's government had just a handful of tanks, and the Ethiopian Air Force consisted of little more than a dozen planes. By way of contrast, Mussolini's government was eventually able to deploy hundreds of tanks in East Africa, as well as massive artillery barrages and a significant air force presence. Thus, while the Italian army would be shown in later years to be enormously deficient in European terms, the war, which was initiated in the autumn of 1935, was clearly a David versus Goliath type conflict, in which the Italians had the upper hand in a way which they had not back in 1895, when the first Italo-Ethiopian War was launched.
So you see them rally back with more weapons, more destruction, more... Boy. Wow.
So what's the hot?
I'm telling you, people. Civilization is just based on destruction, It's not based on anything else. Because how much life get wiped out in them war here. And then just say, oh my bad. Let's split up this land, let's split up that land. Let's just call it bygones be bygones. And then them just find a new set of people figure do the same thing too. And then you see how much people them are in the Ukraine, Ukraine, them are lives them there, those are not video games. As we proceed, people.
Ethiopian War was launched. In response to the invasion of Abyssinia, the League of Nations sanctioned Italy on the 7th of October 1935, 4 days after the initial incursion by de Bono's troops. The two primary countries within the League to whom the responsibility fell for challenging the Italian government's actions were Britain and France, who were the foremost colonial powers across the African continent and who had colonies nearby themselves in Somaliland and all across Ethiopia's western and southern borders, in Sudan and Kenya in the case of Britain. Yet, while the conservative-led national government of Stanley Baldwin in Britain campaigned on and won an election in November 1935 on the premise of supporting the League of Nations and its mission, Baldwin's government almost immediately capitulated to Italian aggression. Within days of arriving in office, the new British Foreign Secretary Samuel Hoare was engaged in talks with his French counterpart Pierre Laval, who was also the French Prime Minister at the time, about how the war could be quickly brought to an end. Here, the desire to appease Italy and prevent it from drifting closer to Nazi Germany was paramount, and the Hoare-Laval Pact, details of which were leaked by the British press in early December, effectively outlined a plan whereby Abyssinia would lose roughly half of its territory to Italy, allowing the Italians to connect their colonies of Eritrea and Somaliland. This was completely unacceptable to Selassie's government and a complete betrayal of the mandate of the League of Nations.
You see, again, betrayal, people. Everywhere you're looking, it's always betrayal. I tell you, say, the whole thing just based upon that damn betrayal person there, that Judas. Everybody want to be Judas. Everybody want to be Judas, you know. Betrayal, betrayal, betrayal. As we proceed, people, may I tell you something I learned history, you know.
Betrayal of the mandate of the League of Nations. Outrage followed. Hoare resigned as British Foreign Minister, and ultimately the revelation of details of the pact brought to an end any efforts to find a diplomatic solution to the conflict. The Hoare-Laval Pact and the wider Abyssinia crisis is generally seen as also sounding the death knell of the League of Nations, an institution which had now conclusively proven its inability to prevent aggressive nations like Italy and the Empire of Japan.
And it's the same thing now with them people that we have them them United Nation people them can't stop nothing. All them do is sit down and write paper. The same thing. Absolutely same 1909, 19 all long. And the same thing, them people make up them same thing there everybody. Because in time they make them group there, Africa wasn't even part of it anyways. The people them decide so them gonna chop up Africa and give it to who and give it to what. From way about them times there. And it's the same conflict, human conflict over land and precious mineral. In terms of Bob Marley, certain things Bob Marley sing, you know, absolutely truth. As we proceed, because me in a class.
Leading its enemies with no justification. With the termination of diplomatic negotiations in December 1935, the war intensified on the ground in Abyssinia. By now, the Ethiopian government was making preparations for its own counteroffensive against the Italian incursion in the north. This was led by Selassie in person and had hoped to sever the Italian lines of communication and launch a counter-invasion of Eritrea. Initially, it met with considerable success, but in the early months of 1936, the tide turned once General Pietro Badoglio, who had previously overseen the Italian campaign,
Pietro Badoglio
was appointed as governor of Eritrea and the leader of the military effort in succession to De Bono, whose oversight of the invasion had been deemed too cautious by Mussolini. Badoglio initiated a brutal campaign in January 1936.
Lord of mercy. Yeah, where him launched though. Massacre. Them type of people, yeah. Them not have no heart. And you know things that them people have picnic too. And for them picnic come out worse than them. Tell us that we have some living creatures upon this world, in this world. Some monsters, some creatures we have. We just have some unnatural beings living on this world. As we proceed, people.
in which poison gas was widely used.
You see what I'm talking about? Poison gas. People. That's why we need to look upon them things, because it not change now. It doesn't change now, man. When we see them, the lady said 20 times and try to kill Abraham Tory since him in the office. 20 times. I went 13, then 14, and then me no know them try what? What's that? 7 more time? So it's a lifelong fight. So that's why I'm saying to the people them so oblivious to what's really happening. Just because they might get entertainment and jokes. As we proceed, people.
Against the Ethiopian armies. Through these methods, a series of victories were quickly won by Badoglio at the battles of Tembien, Amba Aradam, and Shire in northern Ethiopia in the late winter and early spring of 1936. A final effort to maintain the northern front by Selassie was defeated at the Battle of Mechu on the 31st of March 1936, following which northern Ethiopia was effectively under Italian control.
Northern Ethiopia was totally under Italian control, because now them get more superior weapon, because last time they get loose and then people are gonna be bitter about that situation. So obviously, right? Them are go and bring out them best. As we proceed, people.
Control. On the 26th of April 1936, Badoglio launched what he termed the March of the Iron Will, a swift drive southwards from the northern front around Dessie in Wollo province towards the Abyssinian capital of Addis Ababa, a distance of some 200 kilometers. The campaign was accompanied by much fanfare and propaganda in the fascist media back home in Italy. A large mechanized column was the centerpiece of this drive, with over 2,000 tanks, cars, trucks, and other vehicles included in the operation, which transported some 12,500 Italian troops speedily towards Selassie's capital. By now, the Ethiopian armies were decimated from the northern offensive, and as the Italians neared Addis Ababa in early May, the emperor and his family fled from the capital and made their way towards the border with French Somaliland, crossing over as Selassie went into what would be years of exile from his realm. 3 days later, at roughly 4 p.m. on the afternoon of the 5th of May 1936, Badoglio arrived in Addis Ababa at the front of a column of 1,700 vehicles. In the hours that followed, Italian troops began entering the city in what was more of a procession than an actual siege, and occupied prominent buildings all over the capital. The war was now effectively over.
Okay. So they did capture. Okay. That means things them never lose any. Mr. Blind say never lose any fight. When them say I'm going to exile is because he lost this fight. People, me tell you something, like when you hear things, you have to find it out. Honestly, you have to find the truth for yourself. Because them say Haile Selassie I go in a exile. They never said him lost to the Italian in the 1965 battle. And that's why him exile himself and the Italian people and take control of the city. Because them did win the first battle. Me hear about the first battle where them win. Me hear about that all the time. But me never hear about say him did lose the second one. As we proceed, people. But now I'm tell you say, when we're in the classroom, everybody's getting the same information, right? As we proceed,
The Second Italo-Ethiopian War came to an end in May 1936 with the fall of Addis Ababa and the flight of Emperor Haile Selassie from Ethiopia. However, pockets of resistance remained, particularly in the south and west of the country, which were still unoccupied by any Italian forces. Accordingly, fighting would continue for months and years to come. Indeed, all of Abyssinia was never actually brought under effective Italian control. Yet, from May 1936, the Italian government claimed to have won the war. As such, the new colony of Italian Ethiopia was declared to be in existence by Mussolini on the 9th of May 1936. However, this was soon annexed into the newly proclaimed colony of Italian East Africa, which incorporated Abyssinia, Eritrea, and Italian Somaliland, and which stretched all the way across the Horn of Africa, completing the ambition for Italy to create a contiguous colony here 40 years after it had first been attempted in the mid-1890s. Here, the Italians would impose a brutal form of colonial governance, following many of the quasi-genocidal policies which had been developed in Libya in the 1920s, of confining thousands of people to concentration camps and favoring a divide and rule policy.
So them people, you see, them people do it before. The brother there in a German do it, you know. So the whole of them people have the same behavior. The whole of them people do the same thing. All of these people have the same mentality. All of these people have the same mentality, you know. Put the people them in a concentration camp. And them are going like, sir, uncle, that brother that alone did I do that. All of them people do the same thing. Everywhere you look. As we proceed, people.
Different ethnic peoples of Ethiopia were pitted against each other.
And that's always the end result. That's always the end result. Maybe my book could be why history repeats itself. Why does history repeat itself? Or this is the reason why history repeats itself. Because of the same people them are the same fuckery. That's why there'll never be any peace until the evolution of humanity. I say it, the evolution of humanity. That's the only thing I got change it. As we proceed, people, like up the live, share up the live. It's education time.
Peoples of Ethiopia were pitted against each other. With the Italians now largely in control of his country, Emperor Selassie made his way to Europe. His first mission was to present Abyssinia's case at the League of Nations in Geneva. However,
the same place where them never got help him in the first place. I met this happen in the first place, so I might go back to them again.
Timing was far from propitious. In Europe, Nazi Germany had initiated an aggressive program of military rearmament in 1935, and in the spring of 1936, while Selassie was fighting in northern Ethiopia, Hitler had ordered his troops into the Rhineland of western Germany, which German troops had been prevented from entering under the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, the treaty that brought the First World War to an end. Consequently, the governments of Britain and France were no more willing to adopt an aggressive stance against Italy in 1936 than they had been the previous autumn. Nevertheless, while his efforts at redress were in vain, Selassie gained acclaim for a speech he made at a meeting of the League on the 12th of May 1936, in the course of which he denounced the rise of fascism and the use of poison gas by the Italians in East Africa. He was subsequently named Time magazine's Man of the Year.
Wow. You see what them highlight? Them highlight the man. Them not help the man enough. They didn't help him. They highlight his speech. Jesus. him give the man of the Year award in the Times magazine, right? For them speech. That much I show you, you know. When you look upon them things, yeah. Now me understand. I tell you, say every day I listen to them things, that it gives me more clarity for just see certain things. Just to see certain things. Because me always I wonder, oh this, oh that, oh. But you have to go back in the history to find out how and why. Because me ask the wrong people, most of the people bias in a way, so them don't want to give information for free your mind. They want to give you information for trap you. Just like when what's her name? I write books, but edify people, uplift people. All of them other scholars want we write book where we are the victim. So yes, now I'm understanding many things. I'm people to understand them too, you know. So eventually, like 2 years down the line, we can have conversation with the kids. We can break it down to the kids them and give them the detail of everything. Because most of them kids nowadays, them don't understand nothing. The professor, what the professor said? Who was it? Which professor said it? Ali? Was it Ali? So them people never know proper hygiene. So they don't know anything. Them just have more information. And just because you have more information, it doesn't mean say you know. That's why them say experience, going through it. Like we go through certain things, we can't explain to them. And I the same thing Mama Afua said yesterday, Bridget. Yo, me I get deep in them information and children know people. I could continue, yes. I'm hanging out with the smart people as we proceed.
Man of the Year, but the result for Ethiopia was the same. The league was...
I told you. They say, oh yeah, well he's a great author. He could write a book. We just can't save him people them. But wait there. Obviously, in believing in slavery, Haile Selassie, I believe in slavery, yes. Okay, as we proceed, people, because again, I'm going to ask people for help to defend himself, meanwhile, I'm have people in a bondage. As we proceed.
Man of the Year, but the result for Ethiopia was the same. The league was unwilling to take concerted action against Italy, which in any event withdrew from membership of it in December 1937. Meanwhile, Selassie headed for England, where he would live in exile throughout the late 1930s.
Wait there. So that's it? Haile Selassie, I win one battle, lose one battle, ask for help from everybody else, never get no help, and then he no. That can't be the full story. No. That can't be the full story. He was a diplomat, right? Because him say him visit all over the world and him visit. Remember in a Lizard Ali says Lizard Ali says that he was at the Kennedy's funeral. Okay, so him get exiled, him go ask for help, him not get no help, him come back, he get exiled again. Okay, we could continue, people, because we tell them say, oh, the story is told is not how the story is told. But we're gonna continue.
He headed for England, where he would live in exile throughout the late 1930s. While he was in exile in England, the world's politics was in continual flux. Germany's aggression intensified in 1938 with the annexation of Austria and then Czechoslovakia in 1939. When the Nazis invaded Poland the following September, Britain and France declared war, triggering the start of the Second World War.
Okay. So this is where World War II coming now, where yeah. Okay, so all of them things that it's like it's a lot of information, but I'm telling you, everything is connected. Because World War II start 37, 38, right? When Hitler becomes prominent. And when Hitler become prominent, right? And take out Ukraine, all of them places, Ukraine. And then so when the World War start now, it was our France, England. Everybody have to team up now just to go against Germany. It was Germany, yes. I tell you something, I'm aware of this information. So the same time them things you are going, Haile Selassie I was in conflict with Italy over here. So Italy did go on with the same land grab thing and Africa. People may understand them things and breaking them down. That's why I'm saying it's good for one of you understand, you know. That's why I love details. And this is what this is all about. Detailing and understanding these things. More clarity in our existence. Actually, I know I feel good from the year start. From the year start, well, from the month start, I learn about these people and things. It's been very enlightening, refreshing, and educational. Big up on yourself, people. Anyone out there who are listening or rewatch, and all of the people that may stop in for 1 and 2 minutes. Thank you for stopping by. Because me in a school. And most of them people are peer professor and things what we have in a class. In a free school. Big it up. Go on, talk.
Following September, Britain and France declared war, triggering the start of the Second World War. For the time being, Mussolini adopted a cautious stance and did not enter the war. But when the Germans undertook a blistering military campaign in the summer of 1940 that effectively brought continental Western Europe under Berlin's control, the Italians decided to side with Hitler, declaring war on Britain and France on the 10th of...
So the Italian then join up with Hitler, with the German them. Italian join up with the German them. So it was Britain, France, England. So where America there? I could continue, people. Because I'm telling you, say, yo, this is very exciting stuff. Go on, proceed.
1940 and invading southeastern France in an effort to acquire territory there. What this now meant was that the Italians and the British would square off to each other in East Africa. On the 13th of June 1940, an Italian air raid was launched against British Kenya in the first action of the East Africa campaign. This was all part of a wider Italian initiative to conquer Britain's colonies in Egypt and Sudan, and thus unite Italian East Africa with Italy's growing expanse of territory in North Africa. At first, these campaigns proceeded well for Mussolini, but by early 1941, the weaknesses of the Italian military were becoming wholly apparent. Early in 1941, with Italian operations in the Sahara Desert faltering, Mussolini called on Hitler for aid. A German expeditionary force, the famous Afrika Korps, led by Erwin Rommel, was dispatched to North Africa that March, but there would be no major military support offered to the Italian position in East Africa. Thus, in the course of 1941, the British gradually turned the tide here and began pushing the Italians back into Ethiopia and Eritrea after their initial advances into Sudan and Kenya. By this time, Selassie had left Britain and had returned to the Horn of Africa to oversee parts of the campaign to reclaim his homeland from the Italians himself. The fighting here was undertaken by a broad mix of British, Ethiopian, Eritrean, Free French, and Free Belgian forces. Crucially, they had naval superiority, and by early 1941, a new front was being opened in Eritrea following a naval operation in the Red Sea. As a result, by the late spring of 1941, the Italian defense was collapsing on all fronts as the troops in East Africa found themselves effectively cut off from major reinforcements by Mussolini's government. Finally, on the 5th of May 1941, in an event which was stage-managed to occur exactly 5 years after Badoglio had arrived with his Italian forces to Addis Ababa, Selassie re-entered the capital of Ethiopia and proclaimed the liberation of the country from Italy. The restoration of the Solomonic dynasty and Emperor Haile Selassie to power in Ethiopia carried a proviso from the British, who had largely restored the emperor to power. Slavery had to be banned entirely in Ethiopia. There had been piecemeal efforts at doing so as far back as the 1850s, at which time Britain was using its influence as the global superpower of the 19th century to try to curb the slave trade across Africa. These had intensified under Emperor Menelik II and during Selassie's time as regent.
Holy, and two of them people did a slave trade of them. Emperor Menelik and Haile Selassie. Are the British people them have to tell them? Boy. As we proceed, people come tell us how people talk and say and my impression, these people are holy people and these people would not be doing them stuff. That's all I'm saying. As we proceed.
Back in the 1920s, but slavery had never fully been eradicated in Ethiopia and was still a feature of Ethiopian society when the Second Italo-Ethiopian War was initiated in 1935. Following the conquest, the Italians had declared the abolition of slavery a paradoxical.
Oh, even the Italian people them abolish. Oh my goodness. So slavery did go on long in Ethiopia and then placed it long before it abolished everywhere else. As we proceed, people.
Humanitarian act for a state which elsewhere in Africa was engaging in genocide, and whose German ally would soon be using the slave labor of millions of Jews, Poles, Czechs, Russians, and other subject peoples across Central and Eastern Europe to drive.
Okay, so I'm not just black people did that slave back then. Look how much people them enslaved, right? The slave thing, I don't know how them people love the slave thing so much, It's a societal problem. Me no know people love free labor, so. As we proceed, people, them things are eye-opening, I'm telling you.
Its war economy. The British government made it clear to Selassie that this abolition needed to continue once he was restored to power, and that he would have to take concerted steps to make a reality of that abolition. A decree was issued by the emperor to that effect in 1942, from which date we might say that slavery was finally abolished in Ethiopia.
connecting period.
1942. Honestly, I never know. Or them say him, when he came back from exile, right? And they fought and they chased out the Italian with the help of England, with stipulation that he abolished slavery, and slavery was finally abolished in 1942. So I'm gonna see like how the battle came about for him to. I don't know, man. Me I forgot to do some research in so. Right? It just sound kind of vague to me, right? Honestly, it just sound vague. It just sound vague right there, so. Him just come, win the war, run out the Italian people them because them did weak. Them never get no bucketive. So Hitler decides to now give them no bucketive or give them bucketive only in a part of Africa. One part get weak. And him all of a sudden, Haile Selassie walk in, take over, make a stipulation and agreement for cut out slavery in 19. So abolish ABOLISH slavery. (1942). Okay, as we proceed, people.
Though the East Africa Campaign had resulted in a significant victory for the Allies in 1941, it took 4 more years for the Second World War to end in the defeat of Nazi Germany and its allies. When it did, the League of Nations was succeeded by the United Nations, which Ethiopia became a charter member of in 1948. Selassie had gained favorable consideration for his nation when it came to the settlement of East Africa in the aftermath of the conflict, when the Ogaden region was granted to Ethiopia, a region which had long been disputed by the Italians, British, and Abyssinia prior to the war. Selassie's main concern during these years was to continue the modernization of his country. Considerable strides had been made in doing so in the 1920s and 1930s, but there were still deeply entrenched vested interests in the country within the nobility and the church, which were resistant to too much change occurring too rapidly. Selassie was determined to accelerate the pace of change as the war came to an end in the mid-1940s. Eventually, this would result in 1955 with a revised constitution, which moved beyond the Constitution of 1931 and incorporated elements of the US Constitution. However, in practice, the election of parliamentary delegates remained in the hands of the nobility and other powerful bodies, and Ethiopia certainly did not become a Western-style democracy under Selassie's rule in the post-war years. Many controversial issues began to arise in Ethiopia in the post-war period, particularly so during the 1950s. One of these concerned one of the former Italian colonies, Eritrea. This small northern neighbor of Ethiopia's had been placed under British administration following the conclusion of the East Africa Campaign in 1941. In the aftermath of the war, the Allied powers were in favor of Ethiopia's claims to Eritrea, though a small section of the west of the colony was to be joined to British Sudan. Accordingly, when British rule of Eritrea came to an end in the early 1950s, the country was joined with Ethiopia. But this was to be a federal union, in which Eritrea retained its own identity and had certain devolved powers held in the hands of its own government. Selassie, though, was determined to bring Eritrea, which provided Ethiopia with access to the Red Sea, under greater centralized control. To this end, in 1962, he dissolved the independent Eritrean parliament and annexed the country. By that time, the Eritrean Liberation Front, or ELF, an independence movement, had launched an armed struggle against Ethiopian rule. The Eritrean War of Independence would continue for the next 30 years, with the conflict becoming a front in the Cold War as the ELF and other independence movements drifted into the Soviet bloc in order to acquire military aid from the USSR, Cuba, and others. The Eritrean War of Independence was not the only conflict which Emperor Selassie's government faced. Ethnic tensions were also becoming more severe in the 1950s and 1960s. Ethiopia is a nation with approximately 80 different ethnic groups. The empire.
Whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. 80 different ethnic group, people. 80 different culture, different tradition, different way of looking at things. But me did hear 4 before under one umbrella of the empire. And that's why you're going to have complication. Jesus. The complexity of humanity, people. It's something interesting. Trust me. This is very interesting, people. As we proceed.
Effectively been formed through conquest over several centuries, and this had resulted in many ethnic groups remaining unreconciled to the dominance of Ethiopia, above all by the Oromo and Amhara peoples, who made up over half of the country's population. Selassie himself was of Oromo descent. The solution...
Oromo descent? Oromo? Selassie was of Oromo descent. Oromo. What's Oromo? Because how comes everybody claim him like he's in black? Or he's from Africa, but he's not like black African, is he? Because Elon Musk come from Africa, he's not black. As we proceed, people, I'm telling you them things that even bring more questions. What I said, this is part 1, people. This is just finding out the basic, and then we can find out more information. As all of them something I'm gonna write down. As we proceed.
Was favored by Selassie and the Ethiopian government to this situation in the post-war period was to foster the concept of ethnic federalism, whereby Ethiopia was divided into over a dozen major provinces in which different ethnicities predominated. However, rather than fixing the ethnic problem, this fueled it, ensuring that many Oromo, Amhara, Tigrayans, Somalis, and others continued to shape their identity around their ethnicities rather than their shared identity as Ethiopians. This was already causing unrest in the country during Selassie's reign, but as we will see, this has been compounded in more recent times. Of all the ethnic peoples of Ethiopia, those who were most antagonistic to the government were the Tigrayans, who constituted a sizable proportion of the overall population, roughly 7 or 8%, and were the dominant people in Tigray province in the north of the country. The antipathy of Selassie's government towards the Tigrayans was clear for all to see in the 1950s, as the imperial government persistently neglected the province to
see racism. Just because Matella say, oh, look, them things are some shocking things, for real. So just because them people are different from them and probably want them own rules, them own anatomy, them own control over them own life. So them are gonna get punished. Same thing with Rasta people. That's why I say when we look upon it, we hate everybody except one race. We hate every race except one race. We hate everybody except one race. It's sad but true. As we proceed, people.
Imperial government persistently neglected the province, despite mounting evidence of pressure on its resources and the possibility of famine as a result of the destruction of crops by locusts, drought, and disease, outbreaks of smallpox, typhus, and other high mortality.
They don't care. And that will have to get in our head. Not everybody like you. And that's 2 words in one. Not everybody like you. Oh. Because I want to sit down over this and big food and other people over here so starve. That's why I say karma is coming. For all I want to love it and enjoy it. Karma come. Karma come. Karma come. It doesn't belong to any one person. Life doesn't belong to any one person. Because there are 2 people it take to make life. Right? Take 2 people. That's why me and tell people about, I'm a single mother, I'm a single mother, I'm a single mother, I'm a single mother. I'm a single mother, I'm a single mother, I'm a single mother. And if you turn it into one song, because when you say it, it becomes so meaningless. You take 2 for tango. How can you have 10 kids and you're a single mom? Eh? Just the things that we say, sometimes it becomes so pitiful. As we proceed, people.
And other high mortality illnesses. When Tigray eventually did enter famine in 1958, the central government in Addis Ababa did very little to try to relieve the situation, leading to tens of thousands of deaths.
See, tens of thousands of death. This is our graveyard. This is our graveyard, one big dirty graveyard we live in. We dead in. Because nobody makes it out alive. And somebody said I'm dead in the show, yes. But I'm not telling you, say, for centuries and centuries, that's all we do is just pile up bodies, box up bodies left, right, and center. With no meaning in between. We just all pretend, say, oh, museum and classical music and all of those things, we're gonna change the fact, say, our burial ground. And that's what I've come to realize. As we proceed,
Situation, leading to tens of thousands of deaths. Thereafter, a more concerted effort was made in 1959 to address the situation, with Selassie's government being provided with considerable aid from the administration of US President.
Him get handout. Him get handout. That is so sad. And the same thing, you see? Trump now, you see the same thing? Trump now say I cut off here from them people and now give them people no more free money. So they can't starve them people no more. And the younger person at the three country we get together. And we talk about them already. Right? Those countries are doing good. Every other country has scrambled. So even back then, I wonder if them people are next generation I hear what me I say. Because I'm telling you, that generation, them people don't care about nothing. These people in this generation only care about money. So the next generation, it's so important for them to understand them things here, you know. This is so important for them to understand. Because this generation, they not care about the past, they not care about the present, they not care about the future. They care only about nothing, and nothing is money. This is why I'm imploring the next generation to understand why it's so important to look upon them things here and create on our own. Because out of nothing comes something. And it's uno. As we proceed, people, next generation.
Government being provided with considerable aid from the administration of US President Dwight Eisenhower. Nevertheless, by the time the worst of the famine subsided in 1961, it is estimated that about 100,000 people.
Jesus. A moment of silence for all of them people there, when it could have been avoided. That's why I say I respect Burkina Faso and Abraham Traore so much, Because people don't understand what real heroes are. After I get the money, I give little help. And look how much people still get boxed up anyway, see? Just because I don't like them people there. And now I go put in the effort. Nobody puts in the effort into things they don't care about. That's why I'm saying like-minded people. That's the only thing that's gonna change things. People who are like-minded. So the next generation don't have to be like-minded. You can't be hate-minded. No, people don't have no empathy. As we proceed, people.
It is estimated that about 100,000 people had died in Tigray and surrounding regions, while renewed famine struck northern Ethiopia again in the mid-1960s. While Selassie's reign was increasingly being blackened by controversies at home, including famine in Tigray, a war of independence in Eritrea, and ethnic tensions within Ethiopia, Selassie and, by extension, Ethiopia continued to hold a position of considerable international respect as one of the world's longest.
And that me not understand. Like the man make 100,000 people starve. Oh yeah, my bad. Because King Solomon was the wisest man, so obviously all of that. No, me understand all of them same thing that make sense, Them things that really make sense, Because from the beginning, if the fool are lead, there'll never be any smart people. So because he makes so much people starve, him highly respected around the world. I don't understand these things, I don't understand. That's why I'm saying I do them things that so I can understand. And at this point, me have to go do some more research. Because this can't look good. As we proceed.
The world's longest-serving heads of state, he was usually afforded a position of considerable preeminence at major international events, such as the funeral of President John F. Kennedy in Washington.
Yes, and we heard about that. So what's the big deal? I don't understand that though. So he was at the funeral of Mr. Kennedy or George Kennedy or people. It just the whole narrative is something totally different from what I'm hearing. Unless when me I hear somewhere the magical earplug drop out of my ears and I can't hear it in our magical way. And that me I say he was a diplomat. He just went around the world and he greeted people, even dead people. People, I don't know the history of this person. I just hear people talk about him in a great sense of reverence, right? But when me I listen to this, unless there me I go listen to 10 other story and 10 other story, I will give me 10 different chapter. It's crazy. So the man I walk around and I got dead people funeral and he's highly in esteem. The man 100,000 people starve. I don't understand. This is a bad introduction. Maybe there's no part two coming. Maybe I'm just gonna private this here and delete it. I'm gonna private that one here and delete it cause maybe me get all of this thing here wrong with what I'm hearing. Maybe again the magical earplug them fall out and me I hear everything wrong. Cause there's no way I can give credit to a man who win one war, lose a next one, then him show up for your next one where have a whole bunch of different people. all right. Okay. Play it. Play it.
Funeral of President John F. Kennedy in Washington, D.C. in 1963, and of the former French President Charles de Gaulle in France in 1970.
Okay, again, it's a next dead people thing him there. The speech, him famous speech in a Times magazine, you never get no help for that.
Also supplied peace contingents to many areas of conflict, such as the Congo in the early 1960s, and became a prominent nation within the non-aligned movement of nations, which were not members of either NATO or the Warsaw Pact, the respective military alliances of the United States and the Soviet Union in the Cold War. Perhaps most significant of all in terms of international diplomacy at this time was Selassie's leading role in the establishment of the Organization of African Unity in 1963, the forerunner of the African Union. The headquarters of the Organization of African Unity was located in Addis Ababa for many years, under Selassie's rule. Not only did Selassie continue to enjoy a vaunted reputation on the international stage in the second iteration of his reign after the Second World War, but he was viewed by many as a messianic character. In the 1930s, a new quasi-religion and social movement emerged in parts of Africa and the Caribbean, one which mixed elements of the Back to Africa.
Okay, fine. This is where we're gonna come into the Rastafarian movement. And again, this our next part may have to go actually study deep into now because Leonard Howell was the first person who came up with the Rastafari religion. So how did Haile Selassie I become and at that, Mr. People, you same time I get to start ask question, right? People get offended because them don't know themselves. But me say, at least here I can ask them question and eventually go find out. Or I can go ask AI later on. Oh, by the way, people, me I work pam my diaspora city, you know. Me I talk to AI, me not tell no lie. Me I ask him some question and see if me can sketch out everything and because me say AI can do everything in 5 seconds. But more find out how to do it instead of AI do it and me don't know how to do it. Alright people, as we proceed.
Of the Back to Africa movement, which proclaimed that people of African descent in the Americas would wish to return to the African continent now that slavery was at an end, and also Ethiopianism, a branch of Christian worship, which had arisen in the late 19th century amongst African Christians, one which looked to the Ethiopian Church as a native Christian church within Africa, rather than having African Christians take their directives from European religious leaders in Rome, Canterbury, or elsewhere. This new movement combines specific belief in elements of biblical theology and a wide array of different social beliefs. It took its name from Selassie's regent title, dating from the 1920s, Rastafari. Thus, the new religion was known as Rastafarianism, and proponents of it viewed Selassie as a messiah, one who may be the second coming of Christ. These views must be understood in light of Ethiopia's position as the only African state which resisted colonial conquest in the 19th century.
Wait a minute. So when I twist it around and say it was never conquered, but it was conquered though. Am I missing something here, people? Because if him did in a exile, because him lose the war. And him become like, how comes all of a sudden him become the emperor of Haile Selassie of Rastafari? And that me tell you sometimes. Okay, so I'm gonna do a live on I can't say a live, a education. I have to call it something. Edu class. That's what we're gonna call it. We're go and my and I'm gonna do an edu class on Howard. I'm not even sure me have his name right, but me Google him I was Googling him today. I tell you I'm really in depth in them something here now. Because at least I can find information and talk about stuff from I like talk about other than cooking and my sauce. Oh yeah, don't forget to buy a sauce. uh, so yes, more I wanna look into these stuff too. And then we can there's so much things we can do with all of this information. Because me keep on getting an email for write a book. But me keep on telling you guys, write a book so I can say, yes. I agree with everything in the book. As we proceed, people, so we can stop and chat and do whatever in a class. Because we're always in a school of thoughts. As we proceed.
Conquest in the 19th century. Selassie did not explicitly seek to be recognized as a messianic character within Rastafarianism, but he also did not attempt to refute efforts to exalt him in this way.
Me nah say yes and me nah say no. Me nah say yes and me nah say no. Me nah say yes and me nah say no. Whatever you say, go. Well, if other people want to praise him, well, let them praise him because I know he might praise himself. Because them says self-praise is no recommendation. But in the beginning, I him give him name, Kings of Kings, Lords of Lords. Yes? No? People, all of them things I know. Maybe me say the ears what I have is that my ears. But all the stuff that I'm hearing, right? Him never have no affiliation with Rastafari. So me not understand how them say he's the reincarnation of. So maybe me have to go find some real Rasta man. Okay, me I go see if me can find some real Rasta man on Instagram. And see if me can conversate with one and two of them about this. Or maybe invite them for my YouTube channel. When they look and they only see 10 people, they say, me not come there, so I. They say, me not come there, so after you know I have 100,000 viewers. Like I said, look, man, but you're going to have fun over here, so. All right? We're going to talk about Bob Marley, we're going to talk about Malcolm X, we're going to talk about Haile Selassie, we're going to talk about doctors. We're going to talk about nurse. We're going to talk about scientists. We're going to talk about as we proceed, people. It's Tuesday night. Anyway, you're there. If it's nice and warm like how me have my balcony door open, then enjoy. Because last week it was frozen. It was frozen. And when it cold, trust me, your mind. And me never really get no winter body. I stay pretty much even keel since I can't go to Jamaica get my Jamaica body. You have to do with what you have. Yes, people. As we proceed.
Thus, as Rastafarianism gained in popularity in the 1950s in countries like Jamaica, Selassie took on an unusual significance for many people who had never been anywhere near Ethiopia. In contrast to the view of him within Rastafarianism as a quasi-messianic figure, Haile Selassie was actually becoming more oppressive at home in Ethiopia. The last 20 or so years of his reign saw the development of elements of a police state in the country. There were reasons for Selassie's increasing concern about the security of his position. In 1960, while the emperor was on a state visit to Brazil, elements from the Kebur Zabagna, the imperial bodyguard, had attempted a coup d'etat back in Ethiopia. Led by the brothers Gerimane and Mengistu Newe, the insurrectionists had proclaimed Selassie's son and heir, the Crown Prince Asfar Wasson, as the new emperor. The prince appears to have been held captive, but how complicit he might have been in the coup attempt remains unclear to this day. In any event, after 4 days of violence in and around Addis Ababa in mid-December, resulting in over 300 deaths, the attempted overthrow of the emperor...
Jeez, man. Jeez. Again. Again? 300 more again? This is just... Bloodthirsty society, left, right, and center. Where's the humanity, man? $300 more again. Yeah, man, pile them up. Those people are not alive anyways. As we proceed.
Deaths. The attempted overthrow of the emperor had been suppressed, and the leaders were killed. Nevertheless, the 1960 attempted coup was significant in the development of a more repressive authoritarian regime in Ethiopia under Selassie in the 1960s and into the 1970s.
So that means the same thing where that brother the Stalin or Stallone over there so did I do, right? The same thing over Russia where that brother did I do. The same thing with that brother there in Russia I do. The same thing with them people that over there so I do. Same thing. Everywhere you look at the same thing. Sad, that's what I'm telling you. I feel like a deja vu, you know. It feels like a deja vu, and it feels like it's trust me. As we proceed.
1960s and into the 1970s. Hand in hand with the development of this more authoritarian streak in Ethiopian politics was a growing disdain for human rights in the country.
You see that word there? Disdain. Disdain. You know what I mean? Disdain. It means you're nasty. I'm better than you. I'm richer than you. As we continue, people.
These as student protest movements emerged and as communism gained favor in some circles, Selassie's regime dealt ever more frequently in mass arrests and the disappearance of political opponents. The press was widely censored, and intimidation of groups which questioned Selassie and the government was widespread by the 1960s. Compounding matters was the war in Eritrea, where the Imperial Ethiopian Army was engaging in civilian atrocities by the late 1960s. For instance, In December 1970, over 800 civilians were killed by Selassie's forces when they...
Jesus have mercy. Yeah, maybe we should just stop it, yeah, so. You know more of this, yeah. Maybe we never do that for part 2. I don't understand how them people say that money is a good man. Just find it hard to believe, said the introduction. Look, we have to ask so much question. The introduction makes you want to ask so much question. What's going on here, Selassie? All right, Michael, go on.
Forces when they attacked the village of Ona. Moreover, at Hazimo in July 1967, over 170 men were killed by Ethiopian soldiers. Admittedly, some of these atrocities appear not to have been state-ordered, but the war in Eritrea was ultimately of Selassie's making. Unsurprisingly, by the early 1970s, despite the general positive view of Selassie internationally, civil rights groups such as Freedom House were declaring that Ethiopia was moving towards being a repressive, authoritarian regime where human rights were being contravened. By the early 1970s, Selassie's rule and government was becoming increasingly unpopular among substantial sections of the population of Ethiopia. He still garnered support amongst traditional groups such as the church and the nobility, who,
of all people, the church, I pull with them things there, eh? And that match I show you people, them people have, they must have one bed where everybody sleeping, you know. Eh? And I'm telling you, the church, in a one good sense, it's good, you know. But in a more sense, it's not good. It's not good when it collect money from slavery. It's not good when it indoctrinate people in a freedom philosophy. It's not good when it just collect all of the money and not give back nothing. It's not good when they're not going to the neighborhood go take care of the people them. It's not. There's so much not good, but there's must be some good in it, because earlier in time, them did mean so much to the community. How things change, so and still remain the same. That's a trick question. As we proceed, people
garnered support amongst traditional groups such as the church and the nobility, who had much to lose if the old imperial order was overthrown, but many others had no affinity for the ancient ruling dynasty. This disaffection was further compounded in 1972 by the onset of a new severe famine in Ethiopia. This time it was centered on Wollo province in the north of the country near Tigray.
Lord have mercy, not again. More starvation. How much millions of people so far since we watched this show you? In 3 hours, how much? 500 million thousand? Oh, so much people. Eh? As they proceed, people.
This was brought on by drought and was compounded by an inadequate government response and a failure.
Again, inadequate government response. I could have guessed that. I definitely could have guessed that one. All right. Okay. Let's just finish it off, people. Cause we tell you, say, them things are just driving me crazy.
Import extra foodstuffs and deliver them to the affected areas. It is estimated that between 40,000 and 80,000 people died in Wollo and the adjoining regions in the course of 1972 and 1973, while the competition for resources exacerbated ethnic tensions here between groups such as the Oromos, Afars, and Somalis. What was worse, news soon spread that, at the height of the famine, foodstuffs which were actually being successfully produced in Wollo were being exported out of the region to Addis Ababa and other parts of Ethiopia. Eventually, the unrest at Selassie's reign began to boil over. Perhaps this was unsurprising. In 1972, as famine was gripping Wollo, The emperor had turned 80 years of age. He had been in power in one form or another for over half a century, albeit as regent for the first 10 or so years, and with a hiatus between 1936 and 1941. The first signs of disturbance arose in January 1974, when garrison soldiers in the town of Negeli Borana mutinied over a lack of clean drinking water and poor paying conditions. In a symbolic gesture, they detained one of their commanding officers, Lieutenant General Derese Dubale, and made show of him having to drink the water they were forced to consume. This resonated with many across Ethiopia, who were disgruntled at the rigid social structure which prevailed in the country, and the perception of there being an elite of individuals who were connected to Selassie's regime. In early February, as news of the mutiny spread, protests and insurrectionary movements developed across the country. Crucially, many elements within the military and the police services joined the disturbances.
Oh. When the law becomes the lawless, they have a reason. Even though there's no reason, because somebody's going to say, look, you take an oath to uphold the law, but now you have brought the law. But me I say, okay, I will brought the law first. For real, I will brought the law first. Same thing with Donald Trump for kick out the people that out of the country. I will forget kick out first. I don't know enough people. It's just nobody fights for humanity. The good people them will pass off and then now get replaced. And that's our story. That's why I plead to the next generation to understand. So this generation don't care. They don't care about nothing. Past, present, or future, they just don't care. Because they only care about money. That's why it's so important for you to understand why it's so important to care. Because we always I say them not care about we, but we not care about ourselves either. And that's true. We don't care about ourselves. When we say we self, it means we don't care about each other. I tell the honest truth, you know. We don't care if you listen to nothing. We don't care if you change the tone of how we talk to each other. If you not listen to the edu class today, when the doctor I say when she go in a office and places, she have to create a way to communicate with those people in those offices, businesses, 500 Fortune Club, all of them things there. Them find a way to talk to those people in a proper, comfortable way. But what she say? The same thing. She's a doctor. When she up on the street, there's no restraint on how she talk to each other. And she explain it in detail. Me have people around where me practice talking this way. So when I get into those situations, I don't talk a certain way. Know say if you can't think about them things then, if you can't actually think about that. So when time they're around the people, when they're around us, that's when I not care. But when they're around them situation, that you have to think The difference. That's why I'm saying time to write my book. It's gonna be a bestseller, people. It not gonna cure everything, you know, cause trust me, if a person buy a book, then definitely not get cured. Make some noise, make some noise. Love yourself and make some noise. Make some noise, love yourself. Many of us have too much hate in our way. That's a number one. And it's psychologically ingrained. Tell us we don't have nothing good to say to each other. We don't. So what me couldn't want to tell me one thing good for me after everything gonna tell me not good for me. When I gonna make a concerted effort to tell me have a nice day. No. You guys will never say that. Because it's not part of you guys. That's why I said next lifetime it's gonna be different because I'm gonna be aware of this gonna be third lifetime. I'm gonna be well aware of them something I want me to study right now. So all of them things, yeah, it's like I'm ingraining these into my DNA. I'm can comfortable as say that. You see, the foolishness them what people ingrain in them DNA. A certain time them forward again, them not have no knowledge. Them dumb like a doorknob. I mean, I know a doorknob that is dumb, right? When a doorknob gives you the key to open your door. I mean, you can have a key on your door and well, it's difficult to open the door without a doorknob. I'm not saying it's impossible. All right, people, I could go on. I'm telling you something, I can't sit down here all night and reason. As we proceed.
Crucially, many elements within the military and the police services joined the disturbances. This augured ill for Selassie, whose grip on power, like any authoritarian ruler, could only be maintained so long as the military and security forces remained loyal. By early March, Selassie was under sufficient pressure.
And I hear that? And I hear that? That's why one of the petition the police force and the soldier them for same time and dump out whoever, them will get more pay. But them have to go stand up in a line like everybody else because nobody else now get pay. Just the richest of the rich I get pay. And pure excuse. So sick and disgusting. The comedy hour them coming like a some some suicidal watch. When them don't talk, everybody I look for buy some grabbers home. I'll try to buy some acid rope. Because the people are so lie. You just have to look upon it as a joke. Nothing about them not serious. No worry, man. We'll fix it next year. No worry, man. We'll fix it the year after. No worry, man. We'll fix it the year after that. Or the year after the next one. As we proceed.
Selassie was under sufficient pressure that he made a number of announcements that political concessions would be made to make ministers and senior government officials more accountable to the parliament. Moreover, the 1955 constitution would be re-evaluated to see how Ethiopia's politics could be made more inclusive of different groups within the empire.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Okay, all right. We have a little scraps left over here. We can give you that. I hope you're happy with that. Look what time they make this a sin thing. Eh? They never make one in 1940. In 1940 they make one? And then they make one in 1955. Eh? Or is it 1942? But they make him one of them there. They make two of them. Two same thing them make and them not include everybody in it. So what the hell not make it for? So sick of shit. Me say me sick. As we proceed.
More inclusive of different groups within the empire. Yet these compromises failed to stem the tide of unrest. Instead, labor unions called for general strike action across the country in March 1974, and early in April, the significant Muslim minority in the country began agitating for greater religious freedoms. By that time, elements of the military were evidently in charge of much of the running of the government, and Selassie was losing control of the situation. However, it was not until June that the infamous DIRK was set up. This was officially known as the Provisional Military Administrative Council and consisted of relatively low-ranking army officers and officials who effectively seized power in the summer of 1974. That summer, they began a campaign of arrests of prominent political figures and issued a manifesto of proposed reforms. Finally, on the 12th of September 1974, 44 years after he first became emperor and nearly 6 decades since his accession to a position of preeminence in Ethiopian politics, the Derg deposed Emperor Haile Selassie. Following his deposition, Selassie was placed under house arrest. His son, Crown Prince Asfar Wasson, who had been proclaimed as emperor by the leaders of the failed coup of 1960, was now again proclaimed by the Derg. He was not in Ethiopia at the time, and decreed that his father's deposition and the actions of the Provisional Military Administrative Council in proclaiming him as emperor were illegitimate. Accordingly, in March 1975, the Derg abolished the Ethiopian monarchy altogether, bringing the empire to an end and ushering in the creation of a new Ethiopian state. Meanwhile, the new military junta had spent much of the winter of 1974 and the spring of 1975 overseeing the execution of hundreds of those who were associated with the old imperial regime. This included some collateral members of the imperial family, notably Iskender Desta, a grandson of Selassie's, who had also been a prominent figure within the Ethiopian navy. The signs for the former emperor were ominous, and several months later, on the 28th of August 1975, state media announced that Selassie had died the previous day, the 20th.
So he died in August, just this month. Huh? In born July and in dead August.
August. The official cause of death at 83 years of age was given as respiratory failure, but Selassie had almost certainly been strangled to death by Derg soldiers.
Oh my goodness. So I guess that's a legendary history, right? Because me no see, like, I don't understand what's the legacy. Me not understand the legacy. If them actually strangle him, right? It's like him get justice. Look how much people this someone end up like nonchalantly make them life just dissipate. It's crazy though, man. But me tell you, say everybody talk about this man like he's a hero. I'm still a learner, sir. I am still learning, people, and I guess sometimes some of the things that I'm learning is not gonna make me jump with joy and say, "Yay, I love learning this." It's gonna be a tide of up and down, and so I guess me have to have that always in mind. Say, when I read these stories, as much as it lift me up, it made me be cautious in a sense of expectation of what people say about other people. Come tell us that sometimes the best thing is to hear the story from the people them out instead of hear from somebody else. That's just my opinion. That's just in my opinion. Considering the evidence. As we proceed.
Death by Derg soldiers. His remains were interred under a concrete slab in the grounds of the Imperial Palace in Addis Ababa. They were only finally removed in 1992 and placed in Holy Trinity Cathedral in Addis Ababa, near those of his auspicious predecessor.
We've decided to.
Okay, so them bury him. I mean them do whatever. Why, like, no matter what, like, why you guys dig him up later on? Like, me don't understand why not dig him up later on and then put him in somewhere decent. I could have sworn which part him land was decent. At that, me say when people, no matter how terrible a person is when them alive, when them pass off, them become saint. That's just my belief. If them are a terrible person, well, not a terrible person when them dead. I mean, when them alive. If them are a terrible person when them alive, why can't they be a terrible person when they pass? Why you have to give them a spiritual lie? Tell the truth. Tell them to get better and turn them forward again. So hopefully them will learn. If you tell them say them a good person when them pass off, when them come on and do bad things, them are gonna say, "Oh, I'm a good person." As we proceed.
By the time Selassie was killed, Ethiopia had descended into a long civil war from which it would not emerge until the early 1990s. The Derg established Ethiopia as a Soviet-aligned country, espousing Marxist-Leninist principles in the mid-1970s. It was opposed by rival revolutionary groups such as the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Party and the Tigray People's Liberation Front. Compounding matters was the ongoing War of Independence in Eritrea, and from 1977 onwards, a further regional conflict as Ethiopia found itself at war with Somalia over possession of the province of Ogaden. In this morass of political conflicts, political violence amplified across the country, with tens of thousands being killed in the Red Terror unleashed by the Derg regime in the second half of the 1970s. By the 1980s, the Ethiopian Civil War was made even more traumatic by the arrival of new famines, the biggest wave coming between 1983 and 1985, in which upwards of 500,000 people perished.
My goodness, man. Jeez. My goodness, people. Sufferation on earth that go a long time, you know. These are some sad things, you know. You don't have no love for humanity, me. I tell you. I tell you some enough things. It's like you can't tell you say there's water in the lake, right? I mean never see the lake before. So when I got the lake and see the water, it's confirmation. I tell you. There must be some alien upon the earth, yeah. Who just a feed upon them people, yeah. Cause I can't see all life become such a meaningless thing. And where him there? Where Haile Selassie I there? In some retirement home right now? Eh? In cock up him foot and drink a cup of hot chocolate? That's why I say I love life. I really, really do. I'm gonna miss life, but I'm not gonna miss people. And that's the straight up truth. Because life without people is so amazing. Life with people creates society. And society without no seasoning is just straight, raw destructiveness. That's society. It doesn't really exist for anything other than making money. And just recreation of people just to make money. So now when the robot then come in now and then can use the robot then to make money, there's no need for people. But people don't understand that. And I understand say the colder them become and the more the robot them are gonna learn how to be cold. We do this for a long time, man. So our next species are gonna come after we. I gotta treat every species the same, worthless, well deserved. Cause some species upon this earth are treat other species like say them the species they worthless. Just like when the same thing with the vote with Trump. Yeah? How much people vote for other people get kicked out of the country and now them are get kicked out. We no can't understand reflection, And that's the issue. We don't want it to happen to everybody else, but it's not supposed to happen to us. As we proceed, this is a good lesson. It's a sad one, but it's a good one. Why is it good? Because even in a sad situation, there's still understanding. Bad situation, still understanding. It's sad so one man can do so much damage, so much hatred towards other people. And he's so well loved. He's compared to Jesus. I hear people compare him to Jesus. I say Jesus do the same thing where him do. People me tell you say it's I gotta bring on this I'll do this live with the things that black people don't talk about. And them things here people don't talk about. Me never hear nobody talk about this before. You just hear say Haile Selassie is a great man and he's never done anything wrong. So if this is the first introduction, I want to see other introduction because right now the scale unbalance. People have to go show me proof. They balance it out. As we proceed here, people.
The fighting only eventually came to a conclusion in 1991, once the collapse of the Soviet Union ended the flow of weaponry into the Horn of Africa. By the time it ended, nearly 1.5 million people had died from the combined effects.
Jesus. You see? As soon as the Soviet Union stops sending gun. So if they will send gun, either everybody that did off by now, or them will still kill people. Imagine that. Imagine that, people. And that's why I said there's always somebody profiting from chaos. Somebody always make money from chaos. But the thing about it is we are so chaotic. Somebody's making money from chaos because we're being so chaotic. The funeral parlor, the man will sell the curry goat, sell the rum, sell the flowers, sell the casket, gas station I get gas. I make money off of gas. The dog will pass. The whole works. How comes we can't understand them things that I? The reason why I go through this is because I am curious. I know I am saying like-minded people, right? Me I look for like-minded people. So me not go dead and not broken off like heart like Marcus Garvey. I try convince 100 million people say Rosa, not Rosa Park, but what's her name? They were rescue all of them people there, right? No, me want understand for myself. If you don't know want understand for yourself, that's up to Uno. And it's just because Uno choose not to. As we proceed, people.
The combined effects of military conflict, disease, and famine. The end of the Ethiopian Civil War in 1991 brought about a brief respite from the country's woes. A new constitution was established in the mid-1990s, while Eritrea finally gained its independence after 3 decades of fighting. There were then efforts to create an ethno-territorial federal state, where different ethnic groups had control over different provinces of the country where they were dominant. However, renewed problems soon arose. A new war erupted with Eritrea in 1998. The initial fighting ceased in 2000, but border tensions and intermittent conflict have remained a perennial problem in northern Ethiopia. Internally, Ethiopia's efforts to resolve its ethnic tensions by creating a federal state have largely failed. In particular, the government's antagonism towards the Tigray minority in northern Ethiopia, which is a deep-rooted legacy of Selassie's time as emperor, has come.
You see what I talk about? So them I bring the fight to the people them just like when Haile Selassie I was I bring the fight to them. So it's never end. There's never any compromise. We just leave the people them alone. That's why I'm gonna say if everybody all of we just get up and go back to Africa. I don't think so them people will come back to we again. So we have to go waste for plane ticket go there. No sir. That one is tough. This one is totally tough, people. As we proceed,
Of Selassie's time as emperor has come to international attention in recent years. In 2020, the Ethiopian federal government effectively initiated a war against Tigray, one which is ongoing as of late 2022, and which has resulted in war crimes, mass famine, and behavior by the government which many international observers see as genocidal. Thus, while Ethiopia is viewed as having the potential to become a major economic and political power in East Africa, as Africa experiences considerable economic expansion in the 21st century, the structural problems of the country, which were not only left unresolved by Selassie, but exacerbated, remain a grave problem in the Horn of Africa.
Jesus. So the problem when I'm living in the country are the same problem with the people them have to deal with. And the people then cannot come to no resolution. Just leave people alone. Just leave people alone so they can live them life. We no want dominate the people them so far. How can society be this just driven upon just controlling other people so much? Can't be left alone. And I really have some mental disease, you know. No, sir. As we proceed, people.
Problem in the Horn of Africa. Emperor Haile Selassie was a paradoxical character in 20th century history. On the one hand, in the first half of his reign, he made major advances in modernizing Ethiopia even before he became emperor himself, while in the 1930s he emerged as a figurehead in opposition to the rise of fascism and brutality as the Italians invaded and conquered his nation. This reputation as a leading statesman was cemented in the aftermath of the Second World War, when he forged an independent stance on the world stage and was also well regarded for his suppression of slavery in Ethiopia. Overlying all of this is the most unusual position which he has acquired as a messianic character within Rastafarianism. However, Selassie also had many things which stand against him. His reign became increasingly autocratic in his later years, and there were manifold human rights abuses committed at home in Ethiopia between the 1950s and 1970s. Eventually, these resulted in revolution and his overthrow. Additionally, his handling of Eritrea's position resulted in a war which persisted for 30 years and after Selassie's own time. However, perhaps Selassie's greatest crime was in failing to reconcile the ethnic and religious differences of his nation during his long reign as both regent and emperor, which lasted over half a century. This failure has cast a long shadow over modern Ethiopia and continues to create problems in the Horn of Africa today. What do you think of Emperor Haile Selassie? Do you think...
Boy, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if you think about him now, I seriously don't know what to think about him now. I don't know how him come in a Rastafari religion. I don't know how him become people. That was deep. That was deep, people. That was a deep one. That was a deep one. People. Very educational. Very eye-opening. I don't think it's very refreshing. I think it's very cold. Because first of all, OM rise to power was suspect. You want to go win one war? Okay, fine. Technically, them saying win 2 war, right? The man was not against slavery. All of these stuff, I don't understand how. Me just don't understand how this man becomes so famous that everybody gives him so much super credit. It's not like some credit. It's like say, some now I get to know fight in a Rasta, but me just I say, when I look at it, it's just crazy. It's just crazy that people give him so much credit. That's the only thing me look upon, because when people talk about him and now me go study him and obviously me have to go do like more research and stuff like that. But the very fact that me not see him as much people life lost. I'm not saying directly, wipe out the people then, but a lot of the situation, I don't know how it is like people is afraid to talk and say anything about them or something like that. I don't know. Because the very fact say nobody can say nothing about him. Or nobody is honest about him. Or they're just honest to a point. Me just kinda my mind kinda I want to ask more questions, people. I really do. So I'm definitely have to go do thing there. Part 2. And part 1 are almost 3 hours, people. Part 1 has Haile Selassie is almost 3 hours, people. 10 minutes on 3 hours. But it's very informative, very eye-opening. Yo, me I got to up here a while after this, I can't believe this. Okay, last night after we done with live, I go watch Django. I don't need to go watch a movie there for real. I don't need to go take a watch of the movie there. I'm telling you, say, sometimes I don't watch things once and I need to watch it a couple times. But I watched Django last night and I think I go watch it again. I think I go watch it again. But I tell you something, I just open after watching this, listening to this. My eye just wide open, my brain just readily awake. I don't know. Just because me hear so much about Haile Selassie and then you look upon it and it's not really like what them say. Oh boy. Don't think too much into it, sir. Don't dive too deep because you might find knowledge. And I always know that. And this is why I love books. Because once you start read a book, like sometimes hours me stay up, I read a book just because I want to get to the next chapter. The next, character or the next whatever. Book was always a wonderful place for me to go. And now I have my little YouTube channel. It's like my book space. I'm read my books them and I have smart guests and cool listeners. Can't forget the people that I listen. Because I see my something them I go up. Yes, people, like share and ask a friend to subscribe. Because if you don't share it to them, so they're not gonna subscribe. And say if I get one person forget one subscriber, I have 200 subscribers. People, I thank you for no time, thank you for no ears. And I know it's always manners and respect. Love, unity. I'm out.